What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Eager Love podcast. I'm your host, James, and this is my co-host,
Right.
Brian. And today, we have a guest today, Steven. We're talking about online relationships. It's something that's pretty more common than you think, and a lot of kids, even me, I've been a part of. So he's gonna give our insight, his insight on it. So we'll catch you guys after the break.
I always been that type of kid to find somebody better than leave her cause of all the pressure. Niggas think it's really funny when they play around. See a chick cause she thick, tell her slow it down.
One. Let's give a special sponsor, Springfield Best One, Springfield Beast Stone. Check her out. Check out her Instagram. Springfield, that's Springfield Best One. She also got a YouTube channel, Bonnie Stone. Check out her music. It's mad good. And I'm actually in this music video. So go check it out. I'm right there. And make sure you go watch their podcast too. Bonnie Stone and Miss Phenom, Crushing the Culture. And make sure y'all go watch their videos. Watch, and follow her on Instagram. So we're back with our guest here, Steven. Say what's up to the people, Steven.
Hello, my name is Steven Gibbons. I'm excited to be here.
That's great to hear, Steven. This is my first time meeting Steven, so this is one of Brian's friends. So why don't you take the floor, Brian?
Yeah, this is my umpteenth time meeting Steven. So I guess we'll start off with Steven is probably one of my longest lasting friends. I've known him since I was only like 3-4 feet tall. And
Kindergarten.
Yes, great kindergarten.
I actually still remember the time that we first really became friends because, Brian and I were like sort of hanging around each other, but we did the usual kindergartner thing, which is like, hi, how are you? And just basic conversation. And then after school, I go outside, we're talking, Brian's mother sees us and decides, time to capitalize on this, goes up to us, says, hey, would you two like to go on a play date together? And me, not really knowing what that is, I was like, okay. So the rest is history. After that, we just started hanging out a lot. And then middle school, once we went into middle school, we went to different cities. So we sort of like drifted apart for a bit. And then like, particularly recently, we just came back together, sort of like, I think in an equal trip for nostalgia, because we were both like getting into the college space and we were like, we're old.
Yeah.
Let's say hi to some old friends.
Yeah, no, so it's funny how middle school, me and him, that's where we connect because that's where I met him in 6th grade. And I'll tell you how I met him. He was kicking a soccer ball against the school building. So I went up to him. I said, what's up? I said, you want to be friends, basically? And the rest is history. So he's a funny kid. He's different from most kids, which is great because he brings so many different things to the table, and he's all around just a great friend. But so go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that Brian has been like notoriously chill like throughout the entire time, because I'm not really positive what sort of frame of mind he was in when he met you, but I can tell you this much, he hasn't changed. Like
he's so laid back, like nothing bothers him. Like I could literally hit him so hard and just be like, okay.
It's occasionally concerning
Yeah.
how laid back he is. Like I swear when I first met him again, I was like, I don't know if Brian does drugs. He never seemed like the person who would. But he's so laid back that I actually had to ask myself if he was. And I was like, I don't know, which is the best compliment I could give.
Yeah, he's
definition of high on life.
Yeah, he definitely is. So I didn't even realize. So where did you grow up? Because I'm getting that you didn't grow up where we are now.
I grew up in Springfield.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, for 11 years. I just moved to Holyoke in middle school to live in my grandmother's house because she was getting older. And so we sort of stayed here. I went to middle school in Holyoke, then I went to high school in Westfield, so I sort of have this habit of moving cities each time. But now I'm back in college for back in Holyoke, so attending HCC.
Oh, you're at HCC right now.
Yeah,
Yep, if you can believe it, James, he's the same age as us, but he went straight to college during what would be our senior year.
Wow, that's great. How is college?
it's pretty good. I'm not sure exactly how much Pope hyped it up because I know a lot of my teachers were you sort of had like two camps, one of which is like get excited for college and the other one is like college will be the end of you if you do not pay attention in my class. In college, they will never give you help. To put it simply, it's fine. It's school. In many ways it's easier and in some ways it's harder. Like the I have to say the workload is a lot less than high school because for high school it's daily work and it's daily work in every class. Whereas in college it's sort of like broken up. So you won't have every class every day, which means you won't have every assignment every day. So instead of getting a bunch of assignments that are boring, you get less assignments, but they have a little bit more quality to them. So a little bit tougher, but you have a bit longer to work on them. So it sort of like balances out, but it's certainly not the hellscape that a lot of teachers would want you to believe.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I did dual enrollment. I'm pretty sure you guys know what that is.
Yeah,
They've been saying it all throughout high school, but I did it last year, which I'm glad I did because not a lot of kids take the opportunity to do it.
Oh.
So I said, you know what? Let me do this dual enrollment. And it's honestly, college is so fun. I feel like just that one class gave me like what's it called? Like a feel for it because they're really the professors are really not that strict. They're very chill. And depending on who you have, it just depends on how your time is going. But certainly like I have heard that the workload it's not a lot, but it isn't like little. It's so spaced out so that you have the freedom to, all right, this assignment, this paper is due next week or in a couple weeks. But like it's a lot of time management. So I can see that.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for college though.
Yeah,
Understand.
I'd say the biggest difference is how in high school, like all the teachers find it to be sort of a sick joke to like make everything due at the exact same time. They're like, all right, midterm exams are next week. You're having all of them at the same time. Study for all of them. And by the way, on top of that, you still have homework due in every class, every day. In college, it's really like, okay, one midterm will be on Wednesday, the next one on Friday. You can study for them separately. The professors are really willing to help out. Like office hours is like a huge thing where you're able to just go up to the professor during a set amount of time and just ask questions. Like it's something that not a lot of people take advantage of, but the option that it's there already contradicts anything that high school teachers would want you to believe. That, professors will never help you, that you'll never be able to get the notes if you don't write fast enough. That it's not true. If you need the help, they'll give it to you, unless it's a terrible professor, but that's like 1 in every 100.
Yeah.
And it's not as intense as it's being made out to be, but it's certainly not something that you should just coast through and just sort of say, now I'll be fine. Don't need to turn in assignments or whatever. Like, it's certainly not something to slouch on, but it's not a hellscape of work that you're going to have to like get 14 AP classes just to sort of be ready for that experience. Like it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Just kind of try to just put in that question. So how do you feel like in terms of the difference between, all right, I'll start with this. Your like kind of relationships, and you can expand on friendships if you want, but going into college, You said what?
Just all around.
Yeah, all around. How do you feel? How do you feel like college has college made it easier to have a relationship? Has it made it harder? No effect, no change.
I think it's changed them in different ways because the very medium that you're interacting with people changes. So a little bit of background on my previous relationships because the Eager to Love podcast. So, um my last serious relationship was for 3 years from freshman year in high school to pretty much the very end of my junior year. So I was able to get and I did my dual enrollment college all throughout junior year. So I had a little bit of that transition period, had a little bit of life in COVID, so I, got quite a bit of experience around there. And I have to say, the biggest change was only COVID, because with college, we were fortunate enough to be going to the same place because dual enrollment can't exactly go to like Harvard in high school, but as far as relationships at the same college, it's fine. You get time to see each other, and even if you don't, it's not something that I found distracted me at any point. Because I think the most important thing is if you're with someone who has similar ambitions, then you can sort of push each other up, sort of like a ladder. Because if you're able to find someone who is the way I sort of heard it, if I can remember correctly, was the person who you are with does not necessarily have to be in love with you. They need to be in love with who you could be. So when you're with
I like
someone
that.
who is in love with someone that you could be, that means that going through college, you both need to push each other up. So when you have similar ambitions, like 91% of married couples, actually, no, it's 75. 75% of married couples have the same educational level. So if you have similar ambitions, you are going to push each other up. If one person is like really slouching and the other person has to like carry them up, you're going to cause conflict. And while conflict is fine, there's a certain type of conflict where if neither of you does anything about it and each of you just sort of sits there and accepts it, all that's going to happen is it's just going to push forward and forward and forward. And how many opportunities do you really have for a serious relationship? Like 35? Like when you're 35, like it's, at least for women, when you're 35, it's like around the age of like, you're no longer fertile. So if you intend to have a family, game over.
Yeah,
How many options do you have for that?
and I'm glad that you mentioned that point, because me and Brian always talk about, like, so I'll give you an example. Like I've dated, I was talking to somebody in the grade below me, and I'm the type who I have different ambitions. My mindset is college next year. Hers is senior year. It's two different realms. So when you said, I like the analogy that you put, because you said it's kind of like you have to find someone who's going to be in love with the person you can become, and you guys push each other up. So if you guys are both seniors, you're going to look to college and you're going to want the same goals for each other. You can't have like, okay, maybe she wants me to succeed, but she doesn't have that same goal. She can't relate because she's not on that track right now. She's not in that mindset where I have to go to college and this is where I start my life. You know what I'm saying? So I'm very glad that you said that, because that totally, and you used like statistics. People are on me about like exactly. I hope those are exact numbers, right? That's proven.
Yeah, my sociology class. There are some really interesting married couple statistics actually. Like 91% of married couples are actually of the same race or ethnicity, which is a really interesting statistic, because you would assume that everyone would be intermingling a lot more. Because
Yeah.
you see a lot of people who are intermingling, but if you really like think about it, people just oddly naturally gravitate to it. And there's sort of a theory about that. It's not necessarily that people are inherently racist. It's just that they're attracted to similar cultures, which then has similar ambitions. Like, I'm Asian. The common stereotype about Asians is that our parents really drive us to be successful, which is true. And because of that, if I were to be with someone who still is looking up, but they're not exactly as driven as like the hard pounding that Asian parents give to, like, do well in school, do your homework, things like that, then there's going to be conflict there. There's going to be that culture shock. And really, the 10% are just people of different cultures who have that common ground. Like, take my parents, for example. I'm not just Asian, I'm also Irish and German. My dad is Irish and German. My mother, basically Indian and Chinese. But the common ground
And they're both
is...
great people. I met both of them before.
Thank you. But the common ground is a strive to excellence, like hyper excellence. Granted, we could talk all day about the pressures that puts on me or whatever, but having that common ground is the most important. So if you think about it and you sort of rephrase it a bit, not necessarily 91% of married couples who are really, that's like the gold standard of a lasting relationship. If 91% of married couples have similar goals and ambitions, maybe not like exact, like, I don't know, if one person wants to be president, your partner doesn't necessarily have to want to be like vice president or whatever, but they might want to like go in the same direction. If you can have that similar goal, no matter what it is, you'll find a working relationship. And from there, it's just effort. It's just your willingness to not only butt heads, but solve issues. Because, and sort of to circle it back to the college bit, one of the big reasons that I've sort of seen that college couples break off after a while is because they're far apart. As nice as it would be if every couple went to the same college, that's unrealistic. Each individual has different aspirations. Take my parents, for example. They didn't meet until well after college, but my dad went to Wentworth in Boston. My mother went over to England. They're two very different countries.
Yeah.
But they also met online.
Yeah.
And
I also added one thing. When I was reading some of the books that I've been reading, you never want to take your high school sweetheart into college because they'll just break off sooner into your freshman year.
Well, I'd say that sort of depends.
Yeah.
Because sort of like what I was getting towards is that the big reason why these fail is because you go from a relationship where half the time you are physically around each other to now the only thing making it hard for you to leave that person is a block button. With one push of a button, you can go from knowing them to never speaking to them again. Suddenly, that responsibility that's put on you to maintain a quality of a relationship is gone. So suddenly you go from in person hugging each other every day to seeing each other on FaceTime. And that's sort of why statistics have sort of shown that relationships that start online do pretty well. There's a pretty high success rate with them. But if you take an in-person relationship and move it online, how is that going to work? Sort of as like another example is every couple of years, I take a long trip over to Brunei, small country in Southeast Asia where my mother's from. My dad stays here because he only has so much time off from work, and this happens in the summer, so he's still working. But that's fine with him. They sort of just video call every day. My dad stays home, does work. My mother goes over there, does work over there. At the same time, I was dating this girl, very same girl I've been talking about the whole time. Our experiences were wildly different. They sort of just called every day and just sort of updated each other. They just went about their day because they started from interacting online and then got together. I started in person. And so when you go from seeing someone every day at school to then, no matter how hard I try for 6 weeks, I'm never going to be able to see them. That changes your perspective. That's sort of when you sit down and you sort of think like, you know, I'm not used to this. You can also attribute this to COVID and how a lot of couples have been breaking up during COVID. It's because they're able to sit down, they're able to really think about the relationship that they're in, because they know, like, I mean, what's he gonna do? Like, punch me at school? We're not going there. So I could just leave. By the time we get back, he'll be chill, he'll be calm.
Right.
So then that responsibility of keeping things together is just gone. And you'll notice I'm really putting forward the word responsibility a lot, because that's a solid portion of a relationship. Because, you know, the honeymoon phase is a natural part in every relationship, and it can last for however long. And even the chemical in the brain that is sort of attributed to the feeling of true love statistically lasts 3 years, nothing more. So what
Are you
do you
talking
do
about
after that?
pheromones, or is it?
Yeah, well, there's an actual chemical in the brain that sort of like gives you that feeling, like that chemical reaction. Like the feeling of real true love lasts for like 3 years. That doesn't mean that every relationship is dead after 3 years, though. That's kind of silly to think that.
No,
There
it's
are tons of
scientific.
relationships that go for like 30.
It's scientific, but not proven.
Right. I want to interject and add a point before I move on to my next question. I do know, like, what you said about the interracial, like, couples and stuff. Oh, I've seen a lot of, especially like our generation and the generation before us, they typically don't choose to marry. And I like noticed that a lot of couples don't want to marry, but they still have kids and stuff like that. And also, when you say after 3 years, falling in love and it's just gone, I've also noticed somebody that brought out a point is you get married, and after so long, you just have nothing else to talk about. So it's like, you know, so much of each other. So a lot of it's like, what'd you say, Brian?
You fall out of love.
But it's not always that, though. It's not you fall out of love. It's just, Brian, I know almost everything about you, right? How can our friendship get better? There's other ways. Trust. Say if, like, I'll just give an example. Say if I trusted you with something. Say if I trust you with my puppy. Let's give a little example. And you take care of my puppy while I'm gone, and my puppy comes back in great condition. That trust moves up, right? You can move up different ways. Like, not only you can rely on true love, you guys can bond in a way that the trust can go up. Relationships, they do get boring after a while. If you get married to somebody for 50 years, right? Some guys will tell you, like, how does it last so long with a girl? Sometimes you just don't say anything, whatever the girl says, do this, do that. You just don't back talk, stuff like that. That's how they get through them. And it does, like mentally, like for me, I get bored easily. I feel like after a while, especially if you're not talking to somebody after a while, and it's like the connection's not there. If you guys aren't always hanging out, if you're talking online, I've noticed online relationships, you're talking, and the trust, you can't really build trust that way because you're not always together. They could be talking to somebody else. You could be talking to somebody else. Just the trust isn't there. And it leads me to ask you, how does your trust, because you can build off love for so long, but how does your trust build up while you're in that online relationship or a regular relationship? How does that build up over time? How do you make it better?
There are a lot of different sort of points that I could go with there. So I suppose I'll sort of break it down. So in terms of trust in online relationships, because I think that's like sort of the easiest, because I have yet to have an online relationship that's lasted 3 years, but I have had a variety of them. And really the trust that comes with it is really in a couple of like fundamental things I've found. First is because it's online, if you have a problem getting the fundamental trust that they are them, like if you sort of sit down and you're like, are you actually the person that you say you are? Like, are you really, I don't know, Brian Nels from Springfield? Like, is that really the case? Don't go for it. So that's sort of like a fundamental level of trust. But on a deeper level, as you have more conversations, as I sort of say to a lot of people who talk about social media, all interactions are social interactions. How can you trust someone in person? Because you are not attached to them all the time. You aren't attached to anyone all the time. And so the key thing is to understand yourself that you do not have control over those situations. Buddha once said that the root of all suffering is attachment to expectation. And when you have that attachment to whatever it is, if you are attached to always feeling like you cannot trust them, nothing you or them can do is going to fix that. If you are constantly attached to the feeling that they might cheat on you, nothing they or you do, with the exception of them literally never leaving your side, is going to change that. All relationships are fundamentally built on trust. Friendships, love relationships, like all of them, romantic ones, all of them are fundamentally based on trust. So with online, it's no different than in person. It's just the medium that you express that through is very different. Now, for in person, I'd say, and this is actually a pretty big part, especially when it comes to marriage, because I do have sort of a stance on marriage, which is that it's good. And I'll tell you why I think it's good in relation to trust. Because if you have a relationship where, because, you know, every relationship has like conflicts, you cannot avoid that. If, in fact, it's actually shown that a lot of couples have broken up because there have been too little conflict. Like, a too perfect relationship is sometimes not what you need. You need to have some bit of personal growth. Because think about it. If you have a partner who is only showering you with the most praise in the world, they are only giving you positive feedback, you're going to get sick of that after about a month. Because after a month of just being told that you are the best person in the world, you're going to start thinking like, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you need those small negative experiences. Granted, if you have too many, that's equally as bad, but you need that balance. Now, when you have those sort of clashes, one of the important things is, you know, is like that people will bring up is like, oh, if we can't fix this, then we're getting broken up. So the more and more arguments you have where that's sort of dangling over your head, imagine a lifetime of every altercation you have will always have the possibility of destroying everything. Every single conflict that you have. Imagine like being in a relationship where no matter what you do, you can never be positive that that person is not just going to up and leave and say, that's enough. That's really the essence of marriage, which is that you trust the other person through your vows that I don't care what happens. If you're honest with me and I'm honest with you and we have a discussion, I'm not leaving.
That's a great point.
For sure.
If you could say one more point, because we're running out of time, but you can finish.
No, I'm happy to take more questions and just keep going with it. But
One last question here, because we are running out of time. These go by so fast. We got some people we're gonna do part twos with because this really was not enough time.
We need your college Zoom, Steven.
So what is it that you've learned since? Okay, so you're in your freshman year of college, correct?
Yeah.
What is something that you've seen from others that you've learned for yourself? Not just you could just say in general that you've taken into consideration.
Okay. So I'd say the biggest thing that I've learned is because really I can safely say that I've learned an awful lot of this stuff through personal experience, but from seeing a lot of other couples, there's often this sort of this attachment to people that I see. And it's not everyone, it's sort of just a solid portion have people who are like, hey, I need your attention. Hey, I need your attention, like constantly. And it's sort of like a puppy, like grabbing at their legs, and they're like, hey, I need your attention. And I'd say that no matter what, whatever relationship you're in, you always have to sort of set boundaries for yourself and your partner to say like, hey, you know what? This is college. I get that you need my attention, but I have an essay due tomorrow. Granted, there's also another portion where like you do have to be willing to make sacrifices and everything in order to propel things forward. Like if something really means something to someone, like not just like, hey man, I'd really like you to be there for this sale, it would mean a lot. Like that, who cares? But in the real sense that like, hey man, this is like the final showing of like this film that I watched when I was 5, and it was the last film that I saw with my grandfather before they passed away, then yeah, it might be a good idea to like make some space for that. Granted, that's a strange scenario, but it is still something to keep in mind. You have to set boundaries for where things stop, and you also have to be willing to let yourself know where you're willing to make sacrifices. Because in some of the best relationships I've seen, it's partners who are willing to give up time for each other and give up some very precious things to them, but no matter what, never give up their values. Because at the end of the day, you are your own person. If you base all of your value on what other people think of you, you will always be their prisoner. And that's something very important that a lot of couples, I find, are, you can tell that it's going to lead to disaster eventually.
That's
very
that's
cool.
very well said, because you said a bunch of good quotes. You were probably one of the first to give really great insight on kind of your perspective, intellectual. We had one other person do that too, and it's funny how they were in college too. So you guys both gave an intellectual view, and mind you, he's a freshman, right?
Freshman.
In college, Brian.
Yeah, and he's same age as us.
And which, yeah, Steven is Joel though. He's a freshman in college, right? Or a sophomore. He's a freshman.
Yeah. It was previous episode. Well,
yeah, but and you're younger, so it's definitely I like the intellectual point of view that you give, and it's definitely greatly appreciated. So thank you for stopping by, truly.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I'm always happy to come back. There's a lot of stuff that I would love to talk about as well.
Yeah, you need to be on here for part 2 for sure. So that was a great episode with Steven. We're definitely gonna have a part 2. So this Friday, or tonight, whenever you're seeing this, there's gonna be 2 videos, part 1 and 2. We're gonna get him in again because I just like what he had to say. what he brought to the table. And I'm glad that, he was here today. Unfortunately, just not enough time to talk to him fully, but it's going to be a 2-part special. So what would you say?
Has a lot to say.
Yeah, and I'm always here for it. Part 2s. I know there's a couple of people we want back on the show. We're going to get Steven in, though, quicker than before because I really like what he said. But if you've been on the show and you want to be on the show again, if you haven't already been in the show, you want to be on the show, hit us up or hit up Brian. I don't want to hear none of that. Hit up, talk to Brian. Brian will talk to you. He's in charge of the features. Brian Allen 0 Snapchat. Brian Allen __ on Instagram. Allen is spelled ALAN, not ALLEN. It's ALAN. Get it right. And you already know how to spell Brian. BRIAN. So, like I always say, any last words? Any last words, Brian?
Nope.
Like I always say, Brian, you can say it with me. Stay safe. Stay blessed. And peace out.
I always been that type of kid to find somebody better than leave her cause of all the pressure. Niggas think it's really funny when they play around. See a chick cause she thick, tell her slow it down.